So Escoffier is recognized as a niche cryo support that only works on certain main DPSs right now. But is that truly the case? Especially in the future with snezhnaya coming out, the cryo region, would you be making a huge mistake for not pulling for Escoffier, the huge best cryo support we have right now, right before the cryo region? Or is her value gonna actually go down when snezhnaya comes out? This is what we're gonna be discussing today. Hopefully by the end you'll know if you should pull for Escoffier or just simply skip her and wait for better supports. Before we continue that though, if you're trying to get Escoffier or any other characters, I would recommend getting Genesis Crystals from ldshop.gg. It's a cheap, fast and safe game top-up website that offers top-ups for many games, including Genshin impacts, up to 30% cheaper. Check it out in the link in the description or the pinned comment. Alright, so first of all, as we all know, Escoffier is just going to be a simple sub-DPS resistant shredder in general, with a pretty simple kit in general if you only focus on what matters. Basically, her skill is just going to deal damage and follow you around. Her burst is just going to deal damage and also heal you. And her passives, basically, one is just going to heal you. And then the other one, which is the most important passive for Escoffier, is that when you have 1, 2, 3, or 4 Hydra or Cryo characters in your party, Escoffier will decrease the Hydra resistance and Cryo resistance of all opponents hit by her elemental skill or her elemental burst, and it's going to reduce it by 5%, 10%, 50%, or 55% for 12 seconds. So this is the big thing about Escoffier, is the Hydro and Cryo resistant shred. Up to 55% resistant shred is obviously just going to be huge for any team that relies on Hydro or Cryo damage. The only problem, if you guys notice, is the big jump between the 3rd and the 4th level of the resistant shred. It's going to be 5, 10, 15, and then 55. Unfortunately, that means that you need 4 only Hydro or Cryo members in your team for you to get the actual big resistance shred. If you replace only one character by another element, let's say a Nemo or whatever, the resistance shred you get from Escoffier is going to drop by 40%, which is one of her biggest restrictions. So her best passive is also sort of like her worst passive in my opinion. It has a huge restriction. We're going to talk about that more in a little bit, but basically that's it about Escoffier's kit. It just deals damage off field and then gives you Hydro and Cryo resistance shred and also heals you a little bit. That's pretty much it. If we look at her current value, obviously she's going to be the best character you can use in freeze teams. Since you can only use Cryo characters and Hydro characters, freeze teams is the only type of teams that you can go for. So in freeze teams, it's going to increase their value by a huge amount. Whether you play her in teams with like Skirk, for example, which is probably her best team. So you can have like Skirk, Escoffier, and then any 2 other Hydra or Cryo supports, for example, like Furna and Shinha. That's like the best premium Skirk and Escoffier team, and it's probably a top 5 or top 4 team in the game right now. That's going to perform super well. It can reach up to like 120k DPS, which is super good. But yeah, basically any freeze team she's going to work on the best. For example, you can have a Risley team instead of a Skirk team here, or any sort of team you can think of that just has a pure Cryo and Hydro mix of characters. You can even use her with like Hydro main DPSs, so you can have like a Neuvillette team, and then let's say Fiorina and then Escoffier, and then even like Katsuha is also going to give you some resistance shred. Even though in this team she's not going to be providing her full potential, but she's still going to be giving you 15% resistance shred and also dealing some of her own damage, which is pretty good. But yeah, her main value is just freeze teams, either for Cryo or Hydro main DPSs. If we're talking more specifically, her best value is simply just going to be Skirk. As I said before, Skirk is going to be a top 5 or like top 4 DPSs in the game right now, and Escoffier is going to be a necessary slot in her team. Without Escoffier, Skirk is going to fall off significantly. Even though you can argue Skirk is being slowly power crept a little bit, I think she definitely still has great value, and the biggest reason for that is that not Cryo main DPSs like Flynn, Sniffer, whatever right now, all of them are going to need Columbina. So if you need a second team for any reason, Skirk is one of the few options you can have. It's just either Skirk or Muika. So even though technically she did fall off behind so many other main DPSs, if we just remove Columbina, which can now be shared between those main DPSs, Skirk is still pretty valuable. So if we're talking like realistically, she's still top 3 in my opinion, in terms of like actual teams that you can build. And then obviously by default, that makes Escoffier still pretty valuable. The big problem with Escoffier though is, as I mentioned before, her team restriction. She has a huge team restriction, which is that she can only have Cryos or Hydras in her team, and for support, any team restrictions are usually not considered good, because your main DPS is going to have their own team restrictions usually, and you'd want to cater the team to the main DPS, not to the support. So honestly, any team restrictions are not going to be good on any support, no matter how small they are, and then especially if the team restriction is that huge, that prevents you from using like a lot of other characters and buffer buffers and stuff like that for your main DPS, this is sort of a huge deal, honestly. And it's probably the biggest con about Escoffier, because we do have a lot of good characters in this game. For example, like Bennett as an attack buffer. You have Shalonen, for example. You have Anemo resistance shredders and elemental mastery buffers. You have a lot of characters that you can really use with a main DPS, but with Escoffier, you simply won't be able to. Just simply because she requires a full 4-slot Cryo or Hydra team for her to work properly. And by you just exchanging one character, your damage is going to drop significantly because her resistance shred is going to drop for your main DPS. And also her own damage is going to drop since she also relies on her own resistance shred for her to deal decent damage. So yeah, that's a huge and significant con in my opinion. And if we're talking about her future value in snezhnaya, I think that might honestly affect her too. Yes, snezhnaya is going to be a Cryo region with probably more like Cryo main DPSs and stuff like that. But Cryo is not only about freeze. You have reverse melt, for example. You have superconducts, which I've been hearing like leaks and rumors that it might be getting like a full rework or something like that, which will probably be huge, and it might shift to be like the new meta. And I still think freeze is still going to be valuable, but it's not the only thing that's going to be valuable in snezhnaya. And if a new main DPS that comes out that's going to be like pretty decent, even decent with freeze, just by you locking a lot of other characters out just for you to use Escoffier, it's probably going to be a net negative in a lot of cases, honestly, especially in the future. And if you consider that we're also probably getting better Cryo supports, we're definitely getting at least one Cryo support that's going to be like best in slot for some main DPS from snezhnaya. Honestly, Escoffier's value starts to look a little shaky. Now, on the other hand, as I said before, we're having the Cryo region. I'm pretty sure freeze teams are going to be okay. So Escoffier's value is still probably going to be okay, or might even increase a little bit if you have some proper main DPSs that also, you know, be played pretty well with freeze. But in general, all I'm saying is that even though on surface Escoffier is a good Cryo support, she still doesn't cover like the full niche of Cryo support. She's more of a freeze support, very specifically a freeze support, which makes her value for snezhnaya a little, you know, questionable to say the least. So my opinion, when should you get Escoffier? Honestly, I say the only case you should get Escoffier is that if you have Skirk or you're planning to get Skirk, I mean, they're going to be running on the same banner. In that case, I'd say obviously you get Escoffier, yes. Because your Skirk is going to need her and you're going to have probably one of the best like DPSs we have right now. And probably a main DPS that's still going to be at least relevant in the future meta, especially because we're going to have like Cryo weak bosses and stuff like that. I don't think Skirk's value is going to fall anytime soon. It might drop, but it won't completely like collapse or be fully power creeps. That's what I personally think. If anything, I think she might get a little better in the future. So if you're planning to get Skirk, then getting Escoffier is definitely a good investment, and I would heavily recommend that. But if you're not getting Skirk and you just want to get Escoffier as like a fear of missing out, just thinking like, oh, she's a good Cryo support and then snezhnaya is coming out, should I get Escoffier just like for future proofing? I might need her for any future like Cryo main DPSs in the future. Honestly, I think that's too much of a gamble. I mean, maybe we might see a good team that includes Escoffier with a new like snezhnaya, Cryo, or Hydra main DPS or just whatever. But there's also a big chance we might not, honestly. And there might be just better Cryo supports in the future that you can go for. So if you're not really getting Escoffier right now for Skirk specifically, I wouldn't recommend getting her as like as a future investment for snezhnaya, honestly. I think she's too restricted and it's too much of a gamble for you to go about that. So unfortunately for Escoffier, I'd say if you have Skirk, get her for Skirk specifically. Maybe you might need her in the future. If yes, then good. If not, then you can play her with your Skirk that you have. But don't just get Escoffier as like a future investment right now. It's too much of a risky move in my opinion. Worst case scenario, she's probably going to rerun in like 8 months to a year and then you can get her. I mean, if she's good with future characters and she's like super good, then they're definitely going to rerun her at some point within the snezhnaya patch. So I definitely wouldn't stress about that. For her constellations too, if you already have Escoffier and you're thinking, should I get her constellations as like as an investment too, or for Skirk or whatever? Honestly, I'd say some of them are pretty decent. For example, C1 is going to give you an extra 60% Cryo damage, which is pretty good, obviously for any Cryo main DPS, or 60% Cryo crit damage, sorry, which is super good. But then you notice even C1 is going to need the 4 party members restriction, so also, you know, just keep that in mind. I think C1 is pretty decent, especially for like Skirk, for example, or whatever. So if you want to go for it, you can. But again, as an investment, it has the same restrictions, so I don't think it makes her much better as like a general support character. C2 is basically just damage. C3 is just like the level of her elemental skill, which is basically just damage 2. C4 is more healing, so it's just kind of whatever. C5 the level of the burst, just whatever. C6 is also just more damage, a lot more damage, but basically it's also restricted by the 4 party members restriction in my opinion, because with that much extra damage, when you lose out on the extra resistance thread, her own damage is also going to be affected, so everything about her is not really going to ease her restrictions. So honestly, for Constellations, I would recommend getting C1 if you have Skirk. Other than that, no. I think C0 is probably fine. Going for Skirk's own Constellations is probably more valuable at that point. But yeah, that was the video, guys. Tell me, are you guys getting Escoffier and why? Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel. I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.